The origins of the modern day police department, AKA the slave patrollers.
The original police were created to catch slaves. They were slave catchers. There was no need to police a white society. There was no need for that in early America. There was no need for that. Police even became wild when police were always about guarding property. That's what the police are about, guarding property. Say, their job gets stretched out to a moral responsibility and public safety and that kind of thing later on in their development. But the original concept of a police officer is to make sure your property stays with you. They are hired by the rich, first of all, to protect the rich's property.
Now, when you look at the beginnings and inceptions of the police department, it came out of slavery. The slave patrol was originated by different states, different counties, different municipalities, and the government in order to protect the property rights of the rich slave owners. The slave patrols were a mechanism and a tool to be able to control the actual African descendant or the slave population to stop them from rising up and causing insurrection. Now, in 1704, South Carolina instituted its first slave patrol. Now, they used county law, and they made it mandatory for the white males to have to be a part of these slave patrols. In essence, they drafted these people into slave patrolling. The names we would hear was patrollers, paddy rollers, paddies. When we think of the police departments, when you look at their big vans or when they bring people in, you talk about the paddy wagons. All of this stemmed from back in slavery dealing with slave patrollers.
To stem the financial loss of slaves who escape, for whatever reason, South Carolina begins to experiment with different ways for catching them. At first, neighbors are asked to volunteer. Rewards are given to those who capture runaways. When this fails, the legislature passes a law in 1690 that mandates all whites to serve as slave hunters, requiring the entire white population of South Carolina to be a racial police force. Those who refuse to serve are fined. In cities like Charleston, night watchmen are paid to keep an eye out for slaves who violate curfew. They even try using their militia. Then, in 1704, the colony tries something new. They begin to experiment with small makeshift groups of citizen police called patrols.
But now you're forced to leave your own home, your own property, regardless of who you were, unless you were a rich slave owner, and you had to go out and spend your time patrolling Black men and Black women. And so it was set up with a hostile environment. And like I said, slave patrolling started in 1704, and it did not end until emancipation, the Civil War. During the 4 years of the Civil War, that first year, you saw the slave patrollers escalate. Why? Because they knew that with the Civil War, there'll be more and more of insurrection or uprising of the slaves. So the government borrowed from the state militia in order to continue to control the slave population. Now, these slave patrollers, one of the things that they would do was they would come into these houses, the slave houses, randomly. They made sure that, one, they didn't have books. They made sure that they did not have excess items that could be mistaken to view as if they were going to use this to run away with. Basically, they did whatever they wanted to do. When you look at the history of slavery and when the slaves were emancipated, what did they do? They created these codes, these black codes, or the Jim Crow laws, in order to continue to criminalize or institutionalize these Black people so that they can continue with the economic prosperity of the former slave masters. And so if you criminalize them, you put them on a plantation, you put them on a farm, you put them in a prison farm, and you force them to work for free. Again, modern day slavery, modern day policing.